Compounding interest has a minimum most people are below it. Here's something nobody says out loud. Compounding interest is real. It works exactly the way they describe. The math is not a lie, but for most people, for most of their investing lives, it's also almost completely irrelevant, not because they're doing something wrong, not because they picked the wrong fund or started too late, but because compounding has an unspoken minimum, a threshold of accumulated capital below which it barely does anything. And the majority of people who are investing right now are below it. Let me show you exactly what I mean. You've heard the pitch: money earns returns, returns earn returns over time, the growth accelerates, the chart curves upward, wealth builds itself. All of that is true, but there's a detail missing from every version of that story. And it's the most important one. The rate of return doesn't change. What changes is the base it's applied to. 8% of $5,000 is $400. That's what compounding gives you in year one. If you start with $5,000, $400, you could earn that in a weekend of overtime. 8% of $50,000 is $4,000. Getting more useful, but still not doing heavy lifting. 8% of $200,000 is $16,000. Now we're talking. That's real money arriving without you doing anything. 8% of $500,000 is $40,000. That's a decent salary, generated entirely by a portfolio sitting in an index fund. Same rate, completely different outcomes. The compounding isn't more powerful at $500,000, it's the same percentage. The base is just finally large enough for that percentage to matter. This is the thing nobody draws your attention to. Compounding doesn't have an on-off switch, it has a gradient, and in the early years, when your base is small, it's so close to off that the difference is hard to feel. Let's make this concrete. Say you invest $400 a month starting today, consistent, disciplined, no interruptions. You're in a broad index fund earning 8% annually, a reasonable long-term assumption based on historical averages. After year one, you've put in $4,800. The market has added about $180. That's at $180 for 12 months of consistent investing. After 3 years, you've contributed $14,400 total gains from compounding, around $1,700 after 5 years. $24,000 of your own money, roughly $5,200 in market gains. So about 18% of your portfolio at that point was generated by growth. The other 82% is money you physically deposited. You are still, at 5 years, almost entirely the engine of your own portfolio. The compounding is there, it's just not doing much yet. Now jump to year 15. You've put in $72,000. Your portfolio is worth around $138,000. The market has generated $66,000. Nearly as much as you contributed yourself. The split is almost even. Year 20. You've contributed $96,000 portfolio value, roughly $235,000. More than half your wealth at that point, around 59%, came from growth, not from your deposits. Year 25. Contributions total $120,000 portfolio, around $380,000. 2/3 of your wealth is now generated by compounding, not by you. That's the arc. It's slow and almost invisible for years, then it quietly becomes the dominant force. The question is, what happens to most people between year 1 and year 25? The honest answer is that most people don't make it through undisturbed, and that's not a character flaw. It's just life: a job loss, a medical expense, a period of lower income, a move, a divorce. Any of these can force a withdrawal, pause contributions, or both. And when that happens early, before the base is large enough to absorb it, the cost isn't just the money withdrawn, it's the compounding that money would have generated for the next 10, 15, 20 years. Pull $10,000 out of a $30,000 portfolio in year 4, and by year 25 you've lost not just $10,000. You've lost closer to $45,000 in future growth. The money doesn't just disappear, it uncompounds. This is why the advice to just invest and don't touch it is correct but incomplete. The reason most people touch it isn't impatience or ignorance, it's that they had no buffer. The investment account was also the emergency fund, and when the emergency came, as emergencies do, the account got drained, the base got reset, and the clock started over. The compounding doesn't care about your intentions, it only works on the money that stays. So there's a real question here worth sitting with. If compounding is essentially invisible for the first several years, and most disruptions happen in those same early years, is the standard advice, start early, be consistent, trust the process, actually useful, or is it just optimistic? I think it's useful, but only if it's paired with something most financial content skips, a realistic understanding of what phase you're in, and what that phase actually requires from you, because the early years and the late years of investing are not the same problem. They need different strategies. In the early years, roughly until your portfolio reaches somewhere between $100,000 and $150,000, your contributions matter more than your returns. The math is simple. When your base is small, an extra $200 a month in contributions does more for your portfolio than a 1% improvement in annual return. You are the primary growth engine. The market is secondary, which means in this phase, the most important financial lever isn't which fund you picked, it's how much you can consistently add income growth, reduce debt, freed up cash flow. These move the needle faster than any investment optimization in the later years. Once the base is large enough that 8% of it is a meaningful number, the equation flips. Now consistency and protection matter more than additions. A $400,000 portfolio gaining 8% adds $32,000 in a year. You contributing an extra $200 a month adds $2,400. The portfolio is now doing 15 times more work than the extra contribution at that stage. The job isn't to feed the machine, the job is to not break it. There's a psychological dimension here that deserves attention, because it affects a lot of people and almost nobody talks about it directly. When you invest for 2 or 3 years and the gains feel almost insulting, when you've made real sacrifices, contributed consistently, and the market has given you back less than you earn in a month, it creates doubt. Not the dramatic kind, the quiet kind, the kind that makes you wonder if you're missing something, if the people talking about compound wealth are in some category you don't have access to, if maybe you should be doing something different, something faster. That doubt is where bad decisions come from. It's where people stop contributing and shift into speculation, where they chase returns that feel more proportional to the effort, where they cash out to wait for a better entry point that never quite arrives. The doubt is understandable, but it's based on a misreading of where you actually are in the process. You're not failing, you're in the flat section of an exponential curve. The flat section is real, it's necessary, it's where the base gets built, and the only way to get through it is to understand it for what it is rather than interpret it as evidence that something is wrong. Here's what actually helps, stated plainly. First, grow your income before you optimize your investments in the early phase. A $300 raise that goes directly into contributions does more than switching to a fund with a slightly better historical return. This isn't about working harder for its own sake, it's about recognizing that below the compounding threshold, you are the growth mechanism, and the more you can channel into the base, the sooner the base reaches the point where the portfolio takes over. Second, protect the base. Build a genuine emergency fund, 3 to 6 months of real expenses, before you invest heavily, or in parallel with investing, not because emergencies are certain, but because early-stage withdrawals are the most expensive thing that can happen to a long-term portfolio. Protecting the base isn't boring financial caution. It's the highest value move you can make during the years compounding is still getting started. Third, measure your progress honestly. In the early years, your net worth in absolute dollars and your savings rate matter more than your portfolio's performance. Track those, celebrate them, because the metric that feels most visible, market gains, will be underwhelming for years, and if that's your only scoreboard, you'll feel like you're losing a game you're actually winning. Here's the perspective shift I want to leave you with. Compounding is not a reward for patience, it's a mathematical property of accumulated capital, and like most mathematical properties, it has a range where it's powerful and a range where it's negligible. Most people are in the negligible range and don't know it, not because they made mistakes, but because nobody told them where the line is, how long it takes to cross it, or what their actual job is while they're getting there. Your job in the early years is not to let compounding work for you, it barely can, yet your job is to build a base large enough that it eventually will. That's a less inspiring sentence than let your money work for you, but it's the more honest one, and once you accept it, the early years stop feeling like disappointment and start feeling like construction. You're not waiting for something to happen, you're building the thing that makes it happen.